On a frigid February morning in Maryland, 1817, a baby boy was born to a slave woman by the name of Harriet Bailey. Only 41 years earlier, the Declaration of Independence had been signed, proclaiming that all men are created equal. Yet this baby, Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, was born a slave, considered to be less than a person. Why? Because his skin was a few shades darker than the white plantation owners. He had no father. At least none would claim him. Even though his father was likely Caucasian, Frederick was still black, and he was considered property. Frederick's mother, Harriet, worked as a field hand 12 miles from where he was raised by his grandparents. He saw her only during the nighttime when she would risk her own safety to walk the entire 12 miles on foot and lie beside him to help him sleep. When Frederick was 7 years old, he received word that his mother had died. But young Frederick had barely spent any time with his mother. In fact, he once said that he had never seen her in the daylight. His mother was such a stranger that he felt no loss at her death. When we think of slavery, don't we most often think about inhumane treatment, backbreaking labor, awful living conditions? Or do we think about being the property of another human being? Do we stop to consider the way slavery tore families apart? Mothers were sold away from their children. Husbands and wives were separated by a quick sale, never to see each other again. Human lives riven. But slavery didn't just take people away from their families. It prevented them from having families in the first place. Frederick was born into bondage, both mentally and physically. Thoughts, emotions, and human connection were all dulled by the system of slavery. Frederick remembers his master, Captain Anthony, being incredibly cruel. And the overseer, Mr. Plummer, was even worse, always walking around with a cowhide whip and a heavy club. Frederick continued to grow up in the care of his grandmother, along with several other children. Even though he wasn't forced to work as a child, he was still a slave. He was denied the dignity of being treated like a human being. At age 9, Frederick was sent to Baltimore to be a playmate for his owner's relative. Frederick was sent, like a parcel, like a package. He was basically sent to be the pet of another child. While in Baltimore, Frederick learned to read and write from his new mistress. That is, until her husband stepped in, saying learning would forever unfit him to be a slave. He would at once become unmanageable and of no value to his master. Frederick refused to be dumbed down. He would sneak peeks into his playmates' books. When he was down at the shipyard, he would trace letters to learn the alphabet. He would also challenge local white boys to writing contests so he could improve his own. At 16, rebellious and confident, he was sent back to his old master's associate, Thomas Auld. A year later, Auld hired him out to Edward Covey for 1 year. Covey was a farmer infamous for breaking so-called disrespectful slaves. Frederick was awkward on the farm because he had never had to work in a field before. He was seldom without a bleeding back, covered in welts the size of a man's finger. Covey was known for sneaking up on slaves who tried to take a break. After working 6 months for Covey, Frederick was broken in body, soul, and spirit. However, there was a turning point that made the last 6 months more bearable than the first. When Covey attacked and began to beat him, Frederick fought back. In his own words, "At this moment, from whence came the spirit, I don't know. I resolved to fight, and, suiting my action to the resolution, I seized Covey hard by the throat." After fighting for nearly 2 hours, Covey let him go, but as Frederick said, "I considered him as getting entirely the worst end of the bargain, for he had drawn no blood from me, but I had from him. The whole 6 months afterwards that I spent with Mr. Covey, he never laid the weight of his finger upon me in anger." Boldness and defiance took the place of submission in Frederick's heart, though it might have gotten him killed. In 1836, he got together with 4 other slaves and planned a runaway attempt, which was discovered and foiled in advance. Thomas Auld hired him out again, this time as an apprentice ship's caulker back in Baltimore. While there, he made a friend, a free black woman by the name of Anna Murray. She helped him obtain forged papers that declared him a free black sailor. He took a train to New York City and, by doing so, escaped from slavery. Anna followed him, and they were married. With the help of the famed Underground Railroad, they moved to New Bedford, Massachusetts. There, Frederick Bailey changed his last name to Douglas. And so, Frederick Douglass was born. Douglass went from free state to free state, speaking about his experience, and became well known for being a man of accessible eloquence and inspiring passion. In 1839, Douglass met William Lloyd Garrison.